So let's see, why do we have partial views in MVC, right? So in our MVC, right? So there are many areas where you may have to actually render some data, right? Multiple times, and if you have, let's say, an example of student, right, which we have created, right? So let's say in get students, right, you are actually creating, let's say, a loop to display different rows, right? Now here what we used a redundant data here to loop on and use the same piece of code, right, to actually show the data, right? Anyways, as this is a simple row, I mean, we are actually showing everything in a table format, right? This can be actually written once and you can actually use it. But think, if I have to use the same display part in some other views, right? Let's say in 10 different views I want to show the student details, all the details of student, right? Then it's going to be a redundant piece of code, right? So in that case, what we can do is we can actually create a partial view, partial views across, and use them in. So yeah, so we can create one partial view. So partial view is like, you are creating a piece of HTML, right, or a piece of code separated with the views. So that partial view doesn't have any control need to be designed, right? So whenever you call a view, so from view itself you can actually call multiple partial views, and you can build a complete page. So in that way you can actually do. So let's create a simple partial view. Let's see how we can actually design it. So let me go to home. So in home, let's say no, Shanti, it is not like an Ajax. So partial views are like, you're actually creating one page, so where you're actually creating reusable components of page in a separate view, right? So in a separate view only pertaining to that piece. So that is a partial view, but that is not an Ajax which we have, right? So we'll see with the example you'll understand what I'm actually looking for. So in home, in my MVC data, right? So let me just create one action result here. So let me call it as student details maybe. So here let me have view, right? So where I'm going to get my details of students from my college info, which is VJ, and let me call list of students, which is my using MVC data, MVC entity data, right, and call as student. So where I can get it from obj.get students. So this get students return me list of all the students there. Right? And let me push this to which is my students object. So now here, what I'm doing here, so I am going to pass on the students object, list of students object to my view, right? So and in this view I'm going to show all the student details. So this time we are going to show each and every student details in a separate piece of table itself. So let me create a view for this. So let me use student details view and create that. I'm not going to use any model because we'll create our own model for this view. Let's say. Now here you have your student details, right? Now, so in this student details, let's create our own model. So the model for this will be your list of your MVC entity data dot students. This is what we are going to use, right? And normally, how we normally do this is we loop on using this list, right, and then show the details, right? So now instead of doing that, what we'll be doing is we'll actually create a partial view, right? So partial view doesn't actually need to be associated with any action method. You can actually render your partial view directly into your direct view. Right? So let me show you that. So initially, how do we normally show this? So you can actually show it this way. So let's say you want to do it in. So I'm talking about displaying your students' data, right, without partial. So let me call model here. So how can I show? I can actually create a table here and let's say TD. So in TD, let me take item dot student name, right? So roll number. And let's say I have TD, which is item dot. Sorry, that is right. Now let me call this some model for this table. Yes. Okay. So what I'm actually doing here is I'm actually calling my injecting my list of students object into my view, and view obviously accepts it because I'm actually setting the model type for this view is list of students, right? And it takes it and will actually display the data by looking on. Now this piece of code is something which is going to be rendered for each student, right? So let's here. So index, let me just move on to student data instead of data. So let's run this stuff. So by default, it will actually move to home and index, but they're actually redirected my index to action result. This action result to the redirect result. Now you can see it will actually give you each and every detail specifically with respect to different things, right? But you can see that each piece of code I'm actually using, right, needs a separate view how we are actually making. Let's say in these type of views you have 10 different views here, right? And tomorrow you want to add one more attribute to show the data. So let's say as of now you're not showing address here, right? And you created all the views, and in all 10 views you're actually doing this part, and you want to add one more field. Then what you have to do? Then your maintainability will actually increase in that case. Right? So that is the reason why we normally go for partial views. Right? So for partial views, you can create partial view in any folder you want. Right? So normally, let's say if you are creating in your shade, right, you can normally create your views in shade, or also if you want to maintain even your partial views in home, yes, you can also maintain that. Right? So here what I can do, I can create a partial view. Let me right click on this and say add. Let me stop it. We can add a view, it's a direct view, but while creating we mention it as a partial view because partial views doesn't have a layout. We'll come to this part, layout in master, once we are done with this partial views, right? And if you want, you can also make it strongly typed. If you want to attach this partial view always to the student, that you can do that, right? Or else we can make it strongly typed by mentioning model. Either way is okay. So let me call it as underscore each, and so your partial views and your layouts and your view starts, everything starts with underscore, because these underscore, why do we mention this is that these are independent of your controller action methods, right? And you can actually use them across. So let me call it as a student. So one student, I have a partial view, right? Now you can see for partial view everything will be like empty, and you can actually mention the model. So let's say for this model is your MVC into data.student. So I'm taking one student for this, and what I'm going to do here is let me just cut and paste it. Now this is going to be my simple view. So where I'm going to use my model. student name. Right. Now in here, how do I call my partial view? Is the question. So here I can use my HTML helper class again, but you have something called partial, right? And you can give the name of your partial view, and the name of my partial view is your student. So let me do the right name here, copy, right? This is your partial view, and you have to dump. See, this student partial view needs an object of student so that you can actually show some data. So for that, you have the overridden method called object model. If you have any object model for partial view, you can actually send. Now what for object model you can actually pump? Here you have item. So the item is nothing but your in list of students, right? Each student is a each item. So you can actually dump your item. Now this is how you can actually use your function. And you have more, overridden methods here, right? Like you can actually send a dictionary, your partial name, just a model, right, and other steps. So here, let me just dump this item. So as soon as I call partial view, right, so this will be loaded at this point of place where you're defining, right? So in your HTML view, wherever you have defined your partial, right? So at that place, let's say here I'm in my div inside a body. I'm actually trying to render my partial view inside this div, and this will be placed under this div, right? So we'll see this part when we actually done this, and we'll go to resource part and see. So here, let me open up. So it is actually redirecting to student details. Now you can see we have a partial. Now if you go to view source, right? You go to view source. Now you can see that inside this div, right? So we see all the details rendered, right? As a you get a feel that you have actually defined your tables, separate tables for in here, and you are getting data, right? So this is how it actually maintains your data. Now here, if you want to change anything more, you can actually change in one partial view, which is, let's say I'm going to make it as model dot address. I change in one partial view and actually try to access things from any view. Now you'll see those items will be added. Now this is how we normally render partial views, right, into V2. And this is most of the times, right, whenever you're actually developing any site on MVC, always try to use as many partial views as you can, because I mean, when I say as many partial views, whatever piece of code can be reused, right? You can then use them as a partial views. Let's say if you're going for any page and your menus are common across different things, right? Then you don't have to create menu option in each and every view. Rather, you can create one partial view and use it, right? Let's say you are going to use one set of sharing controls in each and every page, right? Then don't go for the recoding that in every view. Rather go for partial, right? That's where you can actually. But partial views can be created anywhere you want inside your views folder. It can be home. Sometimes we create under share, right? Sometimes under home, I mean under the controller wherever you're going to use that, you create a subfolder and use, right? But the only thing is you have to mention your right name to differentiate your views with your partial views. So this is how we normally create partial views and use across different views. Now see here, I can use the same partial view in any other area too. Now I was using this data, right? So let's say I want to use this data specific. I was using and what is the model? It's a stream model. we have any student. Now you can see data for specific name I have, right? So let's go to specific name here. I was using each model. This is a list, right? Now you can see I was actually getting details in some roll number now, right? So what I can do here, I can actually use the same. So let me just comment it all. I'm not going to use anything here. Let me tell it rather, right? So I'll just use my HTML partial of student right. Right. So this will take care of actually rendering my data. So let's run this now. So this is a separate controller called data for specific, right? And it needs a name, right? So we'll provide that. So here you have this. Let me just go for data specific, and let's say I'm going to name as right. Now you can see this data specific is rendering the data in the same fashion, right? As we are using one view, one partial view for all, right? Where I can use this, right? So this is how we can actually use our partial views across different views, and it doesn't need any control attachment, but you can actually style this partial view once at a time, right? And you can have multiple partials in one page. In one page, you can use any number of partial views, and wherever you actually place it, right, it will stay there. So let's say I'm creating one more partial view here. Let's say menu option here, which is let me call it as underscore menu. Let us have partial view. Right. Right. Let's say this is menu. Right. And let's see here what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a table. Right. And I'm going to here. Where I'm going to use this partial view here, and I'll use another partial view, which is right. Let's say I just want to get a menu. That's it. So now if you run this, so let's data for specific SAM. Right, now you can see you actually can divide this, right? You can have a complete menus and your data. Now in this way you can actually render multiple partial views in one view. There is no restriction to this. Right? So this is about your actual data you have. Now similarly, let's say if you have any controller here, right? If you have any controller here. So till now we were using action result, right? Now action result is the parent of all, right? Parent of all the results. Now here you can also use a partial view rendering partial. Now how, let's say in your data specific, right? You want to move your student. Yeah, anyways, as of now we have view for this. Let's say, let me copy this and show you. Let's say you have data specific one, right? And let's say here we have one more way called partial view result, right? Even if you give partial view result or your actual action results, right? So it will take care of whatever you are returning, right? So as of now I was returning my action result. So if I have a view, it will tell. If I have partial result and if you want to actually move, so here you can see you have an option of providing a view. Right? So here I can provide something called student heads, right? Student partial view, where I'm actually seeking something called stu, which is providing my list of students, right? So here what I can do here is, let's say I'll actually extract one student here, So let's say I'm going to give 0. Fine. So you have a partial view which returns your partial view result, right? And it will take care of returning these things. Fine, where you are actually looking for some name only to get details in here, right? So if you want, you can actually remove this and let me just make it more simple. Like let's say I have a student object here, which is 2, and let's say from this, right, object student, I'm gonna call say rest R. Right, so where I'm gonna take R dot, let's say roll number. So obviously I'll actually get only one student, which I'll be displaying on the session. Fine, so let's run this and see what happens when I actually copy this data for specific here, which is my home, and I have data for specific 1. This is how, if you want, you can actually render your partial. Now here, I am not using any view for data for specific. You can use this, right? So for data for specific, I don't have any view. Like you can go to view, it says unable to find matching. Because in my home, you can see that data specific one is not there. But I can actually create a result on fly, which takes both the view content and the object too, right? So this view content will be common, which you have used for partial, right? This student is a view which I'll be using, and I can actually take this. So this is how you can actually use something called partial view result, right? And yeah, you can actually come to that. And in this partial view, you can also use another partial views if you want, right? Let's say you want to render one more partial views, right? Now you can say HTML dot, we have something called partial, right? You can render your menu, let's say. Right? Let me refresh this. Right? You can see this menu. Which means in partial, you can in one partial you can have multiple partial views being called. And whenever it returns, whenever your controller actually returns a partial view, make sure this contains the complete set of data. So that when you're returning this partial view, actually this partial view is a complete page which again renders from multiple partials, right? So that also you can do directly here without creating a views, right? So this is something which is a partial view and partial view result, which it actually gets returned to the user, right? And based on the object, you can directly inject your object into the partial view so that it can actually take it up. Right? It all depends on how you are actually creating your partial view. Right? So this is about your partial view and how you render partial view directly from your controller, right, using your partial view result. Right? So the next one which we'll be checking out is the layout one. So what is this layout? Now in ASP.NET, right, we have seen something called master child pages, right? So master child pages where in order to keep the view consistent, right, across different pages, right, we created a master page where we have seen creating different headers, different footers, different menus, which will be consistent across your ASP.NET pages. Similarly, we have something called layouts here. Now layout, or we can also call this a master views, right, which can be used across different individual views to make a consistent view to the complete set, right? So let's see how we can actually create them, right? So you can create again the layout is something, right, which is independent of all from your control action units, right? You can actually call it. So it is more specific to creating some common content across which can be used across different views, right? So basically, we normally create master pages or master layouts in shared folder. You can see I already have one simple layout here, where what it is doing, it is actually getting all the styles, right, rendering styles and rendering all the bundling everything around. But here you can see I'm having a simple rendered body. So initially, let me just delete this and let me just redesign this to be more simple. Let me just remove all these. Right. So this is a simple HTML you have, which is a layout. Let me give you some meta tags and all. Right. Where you have a simple layout. So here, let's say I want to create a body so that I have a header footer. Similarly, like a header footer, and then let's say I want to get my actual view rendered. Now, as we have content placeholders in ASP.NET, right, we don't have any specific controls here because we have to design our own pages here. So let me use a simple table here, where I have, let's say, 3 different TRs, right, for my body, right, and for footer, let's say, right. So this is very important, guys. This is something which we will be using mostly, right? So it can be one layout. You can have multiple master pages, even in ASP.NET, right? You can have multiple master pages, and you can create any page pertaining to that master page, right? Because you can select master page, and then you can create a content, right? So here, let's say this for header. So let me call it as my site name, right? Now here you have TR. Now here you are going to actually get your body rendered, right? So now here in our ASP.NET we have something called content placeholder, where you can actually place the content wherever you are looking for. You had a head, you had a footer, and then you had an actual content holder for body, which we used to use in child pages as an ID of that content placeholder. And whenever it renders, so using the ID, whatever child you have, right? So using the ID, the master, the actual location of placement of that code, the design. But here you have something called @render body, right? So this render body is the one, right, where all your actual view content will be placed, right? And let me give some after this TD. Let's have one more TR for horizontal, let's say TD. Let me say I have a HR, right? So here I have my site, I have TDs for HR and a render body, and here let's say I have started with HR here, and I have TD, which is my footer. Let's say this is footer, right? And this render here, let's say this is going to take let me take some style as minimum width or minimum height as some 400 pixels. It's simple render one. Now this is my layout I created, where I can actually go ahead and create multiple layouts. Okay. Now, so if you have noticed previously, right, we had some piece of code which was saying we'll actually look into this data, right? Now this piece of code is nothing but if you want to enable your layout, right, to any existing views, you can actually define that in your layout, right? So let's create a new view. Let me create only layout. Let me create a new view here. In my home, let's create some action method called about maybe. Or let me call it as public action home itself. Let's say home, or let's say my home site. Right? So in this, let me right click on this and click on add view. So here, whenever you are adding, right, now you have an option. You have already seen strongly type create partition, right? Now let's see use a layout or master page, you can see. Right? Let me click on this. When you click, it will actually take you to the actual location where you have your layout. But you can see that you can actually create layout in any way you want. You can create directly in home, you can create directly in right, but it will actually show which one to use as a layout. Let me select layout this, I click on OK. Then it will actually take you to the absolute path here. Click on add. Right now you can see it will actually create a default layout tag for you where it is pointing to some layout which is layout.cst. Right now here, let's say this is, let me call it as h1. This is right. So let's run this and see how it's going to render. So we have just used a simple h1. I mean, my site here. If you want to make it h1, you can make this as h1 to be made bigger. Right, and let's keep the footer as is. And let's say here your style is minimum height of, let's say I'm gonna take it as some 40 px, right, just to show this. And here let's say this part. So here you have on my site and okay, sorry, my home, right? Right, you can see you have a my site, right, and you have a footer, right? I mean, sorry, you have a footer here and you have. But anyways, you can arrange this content here. Let's say I'm gonna take this as a chart. Right, and say style, let's say width to be some 100% of your body, whatever you use. You go back and refresh this. Right, you can see you're actually getting this, and you have your common folder, common footer here, which will get. Right, you're getting your site, my site, and you're getting your actual body here, and you have a ruler search. Now this is something which is a small view you have actually created where your page is. Now if you want to make this colored and everything, you can actually do. But main point here is, let's say you have some menus to create, right? So instead of creating individual pages, right, you can actually create in here. Directly where we've already seen that menu part, right? So let me create a separate TR here, TE, right? So here I'm gonna create HTML actionally, right? So let's say I'm going to create one more action view here. Action result for, let me create two action results. Let me create contact, right? And also the about. Right, so these are going to have views of same layout. Let's say contact will have same view. Let me keep this as is, and let's create about and view the same layout page and add. Right, now you have three different views you have. Now let's connect that. So first one, let's say it is home, right? Where I'm going to have an action name. So what is an action name? Action name here is my home, right? I'll take my home as action name, right? And the controller is, anyways, I have home on it. Right? So I'm defining this in my layout. If you see, I'm defining this in my layout, not in any action class, right? So let's take one more 2D and HTML. Let's say contact action method here, and then we have your control. Similarly, let me copy this and paste it here for about your controller and your name of controller. Okay. Now this is how we created a simple links here. So let me call it as text align center, right, so that it will be right. So let's run this. And during running, so let's do one thing. Let me just replace this to my home instead of student details, right? So let's move it to my home so that it will actually directly render my page. Right now you can see, anyways, it actually got instructed because we are using 100%, right? So that's why you can see it. But you can click on this, my home, go to contact, go to about, my home, contact, right, where you can see your footer and your site actually looks in similar, where you can see you have a contact form and everything in one place, right? So here, if you want, you can actually place for layout. Let's say I'm gonna make border as enabled, right? And then I paste this. Where you can see you have every section of your site included. Right? You have the my site here, and you have different sections of home and everything. Now you can see why it is actually getting distorted is you are actually creating TDs, but you are not maintaining the columns here. Now you have 3 TDs here, right? So let's make this column span of this as column span as 3, right? So it should actually cover all the 3 fields. Similarly, your render body also, let's make column span as 3 here, right? And you can see here you have your common TD here, right? So the reason why we are getting this is because of this. Let me just cut it and place this here, right? And make this TD correspond also, right? Now let's run this. Now we'll see some, it's a good plain things you can see now, right? Where you have a home, you have a contact, right? Where everything got arranged. Now when I say making it, right? So now let me remove this HR if you want. HR is something where we were using horizontal rule, right? So that's the reason why it was giving a separate rule for us. So let's remove the HR separate. And now you can see a simple site you have, which is my site. You have 3 different links, home, contact, and about, right? Where you have a simple layout, right? But you content changes. So this is how we create a layout here. Now you can see every time you click on this, right, you are actually getting your name of that view, right, and not your layout. You can see why? Because you can see in your layout, right, by default, let's go to head tab here. You can see there is something called view back title, and we already know what is view back. View back is a MVC property which we have, which can hold a temporary dynamic variable. So it's a dynamic property we have, where I can hold title. Now, title is a dynamic variable, right? As soon as you create this title, you create a variable, but here you can see, whenever you are using this, if you go to your child pages, you can see it will use your view back title as well. Now let's say this, I'm going to change it home. Let's say this is a contact, capital C, and about, I'm going to make this. Now we have 3 different childs here and 1 layout, right? So here, let it render. So here we go to home, contact, and about, right? Now you can see that all the layouts, right, are being used. We feel that they are actually rendered from here, but they are actually rendered from my site, which is a layout site. Now with this, using this, right, you can have actually, if you want to append, you can append something. Let's say for all my child pages, I should show the title, including, let's say I want to include something called with this I want to implement some type symbols, some text here, like some type symbol, and say website. So it means that I want to show my site name. Let's say it is a mysite.com website. Just show it as mysite.com, and then you do that. So let's refresh this, run this up. But you can see now here you have home, and let me just remove this plus. Right? We are changing something at layout, and you can see this home, my site contact, and my site about. Right? Where you're actually getting a hold of your header. I mean the tab title, the page title at one place. Right? And you're getting it. This is something which is your layout which you have. Right? Now, one small thing which we notice here, right? So whenever we create any home child page, right? What we're doing is we're actually, anyways, it actually got, defaulted, right? Like whenever we create a view from your control app, what we're doing, we're actually selecting the view here, layout for that view, and where we are actually making it yes, right? But sometimes you may have to change layout because you can have any number of layouts in here, right? So if you want to make some, for all pages, if you want to default your view, right, we default your layout across, and you don't want to mention here, right? You can do that. So we have something called view start here. Now you can see you already have a view start here which says everything can use this layout. So when you create a view start in any of the folder wherever you want, right? So all the other views, whatever are there, will automatically render your layout page here. So that you can actually use, where you can remove this and you can use a view start, which we will use. So second point is that if you are, apart from view start, if you define your own layout, then this layout will be the main layout for your view. If you are defining any layout in your view, this will be the first reference, and then it will go to view start. Right. Similarly, from controller to in action method to, you can actually map your layouts. Let's say here, see in your view that you have multiple things here where you can see here we have something called view name, right? Which view you want to return, right? And then also you have something called master name. Master name is nothing but which layout you want to render, right, for this view. Then what happens in this master, your view will be embedded and it will be. That's how your master page works, right? It can be loaded from any, multiple places. So by default, we normally prefer this layout, but you can actually prefer your view start in your folder, and you can create any number of view starts within a folder. Now let's say for my home controller, I have a view start, right? So wherever I want to change, I can actually change at one place to view start. Similarly, you have student, you can create a view start, right? And when you create that, right, that all views will automatically take this layout for the rendering of it. So this is something which is our partial views and layouts which you have in here. Right? And sorry, I didn't get your question. Why render body? Okay, this render body is this render body will actually act as a content placeholder. We had content placeholder in our ASP.NET, right? If you remember. Now this render body, whenever you use this layout, let's say you are using for my home, which is a end child view, right? If you are using this layout, then what happens is whatever you write in this complete view will be rendered at this position only. Right? Whenever you are writing render body, which means in any child view, whatever view you are creating, if you are creating multiple HTMLs here, but if you are mentioning layout, right, what it will do is everything whatever you are coding in this view will be embedded in a layout at render bodies position. That's the reason we have. Right? Okay. If you remember content placeholder, then this is the same. Right? This is like a content placeholder you are actually putting up, and you can have any type of rendering. Right? And if you ask why I'm using this call span, now this call span is your TV, I mean table data's property here. Now what I'm using is, you can see there is one row and another row, and there are 4 rows, right? And among the 4 rows, one row got 3 cells, which means each cell in a table, right, each cell will be aligned as in one line. But if I say call span 3, which means I'm saying this cell is equal to 3 different columns, then what happens? It will spread across 3 different columns. That's why you can see when you run it, right, you can see this TD. I'm defining only one TD here. If you can see the code, one TD, but I said call span 3, which means all these 3 columns will be accommodated within one cell. Similarly, I said call span 3, call span 3. That's the reason why your page looks good. This is one complete column, but you can see the same row, same table in different row, you have 3 different columns. Again here, we are actually merging all columns here, right, with the one column, making the column span is 3. So what happens is, it will actually spread across to 3 columns, and if there are more, then it will actually. Similarly, you have a content folder, some common footer here where you are actually making, and you can actually make style here to minimum height of let's say again some 40 pixels, right, where you will cite you a bit content. Right, so this is how we can actually design our actual layout and render them in different ways. Now again in layout, right, again in layout, if you want to render any partials, you can do that. All your headers, footers, and your menus can be partial again, right? Again, how to define? Let's say this is your menu, right? This is your menu which you are actually looking for, right? Now what I can do, I can create a partial here. Let's say this is my partial. Let me create a menu partial. I click on this, and you can create a view underscore menu, which is my partial, right? And click on add. Right. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take this here. Let me create a table, and right, I have my partial. So in my layout, what I'll do, in my TR, let me remove all this and call it as 2D, right? And I'll render my partial. So the partial name is this one. Right. Then what it will do, it will actually get the data to this. Now let me run this. Now anyways, you may see the call span as 3 here, right? So we are using only one call span here, so it may shrink to 1 column. But let's see how it actually goes. Right, so here you can see the menu here. Where is the menu? Oh, okay. We have some other menu here. Okay, fine, not a problem. So let's use that menu here. Let's remove this data. Let's go back and refresh this. Right, you have home contact, right, where you're actually getting your menus here. So let's move this part to PD, right, and just say this as call span 3, right, in one call. So you can actually use that your space here. Right. So now you can see your home contact, but here this complete cell, because what you can see is a separate, this is something which is a separate partial view. Similarly, if you want to create a footer, you can do it, right? So this is how you can actually create your partial views for views of each and every part. Right? Again, we know that in our home page we are actually using some more partial views. So that is a reason why partial views are mainly like you can create some piece of code which can be reused, and make sure whenever you're designing a partial view, make sure that you're actually getting your reusable code in mind. Right? So this is about we have partial views and layouts and how we actually use partial views return and layouts return from controller methods directly. Right? So in our next class we'll see the JSON result.